All right. Welcome to chapter 7. This is the last chapter of this course, and we will be here talking about the maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction prioritization. And basically, here we're going to try to cover in this chapter two major strategies that we typically do, or at least we pick one of the two at the minimum in any PMS system. So the first one is the single year prioritization, which is a sort of a ranking methodology when it comes to having many projects that we look into and how are we going to rank them and how are we going to pick um, the top two or three based on many factors, including of course the cost. While the other procedure is the multi-year prioritization, which is heavily dependent on optimization techniques. So let's start with the single year ranking. The single year ranking, as we all know, again, if you end up being a payment management system, each single year, you're gonna have the pavement sections in your network will be ranked according to certain ranking guidelines that you're gonna follow in your payment management system, and that ranking will also be linked to the amount of money actually is available for maintenance and rehabilitation. So you're gonna rank them, and you're gonna keep a check mark. Okay, I'm gonna fix the first or second or third, up to the third or fourth project out of maybe 10, until you use up all the money available for that fiscal year. So the most common ranking criteria that we use for any single year ranking is actually it based on the condition of the pavement, which you guys have been doing, and we got to know now how to measure the PCI. So basically, when I say ranking per condition, it's basically you get the PCI of multiple projects, and then you're gonna rank them from the worst to the best, or vice versa, and then pick and rank the sections based on their condition, or you can rank them based on the initial cost, how much each project is going to cost. That might also be a triggering criteria within the single year ranking process. So the criteria can also be, besides these two the condition and the initial cost, they can also be weighed by other factors, such as what's the classification of that roadway. Are we talking about an interstate or a collector or a local street? Also, it can depend on heavily on the traffic. Is this project is handling heavy traffic, and therefore I may need to maybe to jump onto it, or maybe put more priority on to that roadway compared to another roadway or another section that has less amount of traffic. Or actually the annual maintenance cost again boils down sometimes to the annual maintenance cost. So the really the flow chart here that I may ask you in an exam or an interview, get, draw for me the flow chart of a single year ranking. Really, we need to start with what is the current condition of the pavement network that you're dealing with, a section by section, of course, and then we need to select the treatment and what's the estimated cost from some sort of rules that you're following in your payment management system. And then you're going to end up applying what we call weighing factors. Weighting factors, those are just to give us an idea how are we going to rank them based on, again, on either the condition of the pavement or the traffic, or a combination between the two, as well as the cost. But eventually we're going to end up ranking by certain criteria, and then that's going to lead us to we match the ranked list to the budget that's available to us. So some of the limitation regarding this type of technique, which is the single year ranking, we typically here we have to stick with one fixation per road. So there is really no alternative treatments are considered for each section, because now it gets really cumbersome if we just look into um, if I have like 5 sections, and every section I'm going to end up with 2 or 3 alternatives, it's going to be hard to start ranking them on a yearly basis, especially if it's a single year ranking. So if we were to pick the single year ranking, we tend to pick one treatment per section, and we go with it. So, and that's a limitation by itself, because now we really are not looking into multiple treatments, and each treatment is going to have its own cost, of course. And also another limitation is the long-term impact that they were really not evaluating that. We're just looking into, again, year by year. It's not multi-year ranking, it's a year by year. So we don't know, again, what's going to be the long-term impact of selecting certain project versus the other, and also what's the long-term impact on what's the selected maintenance or rehabilitation technique that we ended up picking. Here an example of some of the required projects that you may have. So really, the first column here is the project ID, just the name or the ID of the project. But more importantly, is the condition level. This is the PCI. What's the PCI of each one of those projects? So we have one of the lowest is 52, all the way to the highest is 85. And then this is the recommended treatment for every single project and it goes from preventative maintenance all the way to major rehabilitation, depending, of course, on the associated PCI or the condition level. And then, of course, toward the end here, this is the cost in millions of dollars. So once you have now your full list of sections or projects versus their condition, and what's the cost associated with each one of the projects, now you need to rank them. And ranking here at first in this slide, we're ranking them solely based on the PCI condition. So, for example, the project number one that we picked here is based on, whoops, 60. This is 67C. 67C. This is had the lowest PCI, the worst PCI. So if we are following the old school, saying that the worst is it has to be fixed, this is now again we're addressing the worst first. Then 67C would be rank number one, and we need a major rehabilitation, and the cost for that project will be $3 million. And then the list would go on all the way to University One, and that had a PCI of 85, if you recall, right here, and that's why it's ranked the lowest. And that need a preventative maintenance, needing a $500,000 to do the project. So if we're really again going with this mentality that's based on addressing the worst first, then assuming that if the total budget for this agency is $4 million, only $4 million, then only project 67C and 67A will get completed. Why? Again, go back to the list. The first project, it needs 3 million. The second project needs 1 million. If you sum them up, that is $4 million, and you're done. Your budget is now limited to do the first two only. That's what it is. However, if you now try to tweak things a little bit, now you're trying now to rank based on the pavement condition, but it's also weighed by the traffic amount. Let's say now, and instead of just looking into the PCI, I really want to fix some good roads, some roads that they are heavily trafficked. So now we're going to introduce a weighing factor to reflect such traffic level that's applied to the condition of the section. So, for example, and again, this is really the weighing factors. It depends on the agency that you're going to be working with. This is all will be already well established in a PMS system, well in advance. But let's say a traffic level weighing factor, I have a zero point 0.5 if it's high traffic. I have a 1 if it's average traffic. I have 1.5 if it's low traffic. What are these numbers? These numbers actually are going to end up multiplier to the condition. So for example, 67A, it was an average traffic, meaning that the traffic factor is 1, and then 1 times the PCI, and that's gonna give me a weight condition is 67. Versus, for example, 67B, the traffic was low, and therefore it's 1.5 times 82, that's 123. And now what we do, we actually now look into the ones that has still the lowest PCI, but now the lowest weighed PCI. So now things start to, the ranking now are being different. Now, all of a sudden, now we're having now 14A ranked number one with the highest priority, simply because the condition is 71, but the traffic is so high, so it's bringing down the number now to 36. So that's even lower. So it's gonna be now ranked number one. So once we now are doing the weighing condition and looking back now at the same budget, if we have 4 millions, the 4 millions is fixed. Now the projects to be completed are actually now three projects instead of two. Why? Because 14A, this is project number one, and 14A, if we recall previously, 14A it needs $2 million. Oops, 14A it needs $2 million, and the other two projects that considered now is 14B, and it needs $1.5 million, and University One it needs $500,000. So two, one and a half, that now sum up to $4 million. So now, with the weighted average based on the condition of the pavement as well as the traffic, now where the ranking is different, and now we're doing three projects covered by that $4 million limited budget instead of two. So the ranking process now is also again referred to as still it's a single layer prioritization. So it's not just a single year ranking, it's single year prioritization based on both the condition of the pavement as well as the amount of traffic handled by those pavement sections. Moving now on to the multi-year prioritization. So the multi-year prioritization is another process that's used to, and I like to point out this objectively identify the best combination of projects over a multi-year period. So it's actually the multi-year prioritization is a more simplistic way, and a more simplistic way, it's a tool that we typically use as payment management engineers to help us make a cost-effective decision on three major questions: what, where, and when. On what is the treatment that's most cost-effective. So the good thing here on the multi-year prioritization compared to the single year, we look into multiple alternative treatments, and we try to pick the one that's the most cost effective. The second question is where treatments are needed. We need to locate them based on the PCI condition. And when is the best time or condition to program a treatment? Since now it's multi-year prioritization, it's not just, we're not looking at one fiscal year, we're not limited to that anymore. Now we're looking into a wider vision where now we're looking into 2 to 3 to 4 years worth of planning. And if we really answer those three vital questions in a precise way, we will be in a much better shape compared to the single year system. So in the multi-year prioritization system, we try now to evaluate, as I told you before, it's a longer term impact. It's not just a 1 year by 1 year. We look into the long-term impact of different rehabilitation strategies through the following elements. The first one is again the timing of the rehabilitation, and that's actually the answer of when is the best time or the condition to program a treatment. And we also look into the economic analysis of the feasibility of the feasible maintenance as well as the rehabilitation alternative, and then also evaluate what would be the predicted impact on the overall network over time for each one of those combinations of projects over a given period of time. So that's basically what we're trying to accomplish using the multi-year prioritization system. So if you want to put it in a flow chart similar to what we had in single year prioritization, for multi-year prioritization is actually we still have to look into what's the current or the predicted condition of the pavement sections in the network. And but now, and instead of just picking one treatment per section, we now have the leisure to select the optimal treatment and timing for each segment. That's very important, and that's gonna trigger for us a more well-informed estimated cost, which is gonna trigger to conduct the overall analysis, and that's gonna lead us to matching in a better way a prioritized list to the available budget that we have. Another thing also we look into using the multi-year prioritization is what we call a benefit to cost ratio. This is a very common term nowadays, Um, it's not just about we should not look into the initial cost of a treatment, because if you look into that, you're going to end up always picking the cheap treatment, and but that's not the best way always to do. You also have to look into what's the benefit to the cost ratio. If you are investing in a better treatment, that's going to be more beneficial and is going to give you more life longevity of that payment section, then it might be worthwhile looking into that ratio, and instead of just looking at the cost as one deciding element. So we look into the benefit to the cost ratio. The benefit is actually the area under the performance curve. For example, if I have one single treatment versus maybe multiple treatments over the course of the pavement condition, now the benefit is actually what's the area under the curve. And the more area covered, the better, the higher the benefit. Versus the cost is actually, this is the present worth cost for each alternative that we're looking into. So this is here what I was trying to explain to you. If I really plot now in the x-axis, this is the age in years, and the y-axis, it can be the PCI, the pavement condition index, out of 100, or it can be the pavement serviceability index out of 5, scale of 5, regardless. But now you're looking into, I have a brand new section. It's gonna go down a certain amount after certain years, and now I'm going to apply one treatment and a second treatment, and here the life of the pavement is going to reach its terminal life. Now I'm interested to measure what is the area under that curve. And in fact, to be more precise, it's the whole area here. What's the area? And that is actually the benefit if we were to follow these two types of treatments versus if I maybe followed another, maybe if I waited and then I have another treatment. So really comparing multiple treatment alternatives is by looking into the benefit, which is the area under the curve. And of course, again, the higher the benefit to cost ratio, the more effective the treatment it is. So, for example, here, this is assuming that this is the existing pavement performance, and now we're going to apply certain treatment. And that treatment, again, this line here, this is actually represent the predicted pavement performance if I were to apply this kind of treatment. And now I can look into that benefit. And by the way, the trigger limit, maybe I'll take it back. Um, yeah, the benefit actually is just to this line because this is the terminal life. So really, this is the failure point. So the benefit is only, again, the area under the curve from the treatment all the way to the terminal line here, or the failure point. Same thing here. The benefit will be the area under the curve, or if you want to incorporate now traffic, it can be the area times the traffic factor, which is similar to what we did for the single year. So the traffic factor here is going to act as a weighing factor in order to adjust the procedure when we're going to use it now to prioritize pavement segments that they are handling much more traffic compared to sections that they are handling less amount of traffic. This is here a clear example of what I was referring to. If you have, this is the existing pavement condition, I can let it go all the way to here before I apply treatment number 2, which is in red. And now I need to look into treatment 2 and how many years and what's the cost, which is this area, versus if I'm not gonna let the pavement really deteriorate that bad. I'm gonna stop it right here. But instead of applying maybe a thick overlay, which is that refers to the red line, I'm gonna maybe apply a seal coat for two consecutive times. And now I need to measure what's the benefit here, but the failure now is gonna be considered at this point because now the pavement is gonna fail at certain point. Again, failure can be defined at different points, but if you are applying seal coats only, the pavement now, it cannot really withstand very low PCI anymore compared to if you were to do a thick overlay. And again, the comparison, or how are you going to come up with which one is better? Again, the area, theoretically, the area under the curve. What are the differences between multi-year prioritization and just a simple ranking? Um, we're talking here about, again, there are several feasible treatments that can be considered if you are doing a multi-year prioritization compared to the single-year ranking. Effectiveness of each treatment is very much considered using the multi-year ranking, multi-year prioritization compared to the single-year ranking. There are more factors to be used in this analysis, the multi-year. So if I ask you, give me 3 or 4 advantages of the multi-year prioritization versus the one-year ranking, those are the ones. And of course, coming up with the solutions will heavily be closely representing the results of a true optimization analysis compared to a single year ranking. Why? But on the contrary, sometimes based on the advantages that you've seen here, you would say, then why would we need to go through the single year ranking at all? We should always do a multi-year prioritization if this is of all because of all these advantages. Sometimes, though, the multi-year prioritization doesn't really succeed. It might be outside our engineering judgment, as I'm putting here the very first one of the common reasons is just the management philosophy supports the worst first. And if you're really following the old school, you would be a big fan of the single year ranking. You're going to rank them based on from worst to the highest to the best, and you're going to fix the worst first. And sometimes there's outside influences that affect the project selection. Lots of reasons you could think of, and also the large backlog of projects. So those are some of the reasons why sometimes the multi-year ranking, multi-year prioritization doesn't succeed. In order for it to succeed, you need to have some minimal analysis requirements to make sure for the multi-year prioritization to work. Those requirements, we definitely need to have the condition inventory data, and that's why for the whole semester we've been talking about how can we know the condition of the pavement, how can we get a good inventory information, and how can we end up having the PCI, what's the pavement condition index for that section. We also have to have a performance model, which is what we discussed in the previous chapter. We need to have those performance prediction model, how each one of these treatments is going to perform in the field. I need to have those performance models to let me compare compare different treatments. And of course, we need to know what are the different treatments and strategies and conditions we can apply in the field. And we definitely have to have some analysis tools such as the benefit to cost ratio analysis or the life cycle cost assessment, which we discussed in a previous chapter. The requirements for developing such a strategy, again, we need to list a list of strategy guidelines and treatment options. We need to know the costs. We need to know what's the payment performance models. I think it's somehow similar to what we discussed previously. This is just here, I'm showing here an example of a decision tree that we can follow in a um, multi-year prioritization. This is another decision matrix for you to take a look at. And these are the action categories. Once now you come up with all the requirements that you have, you're going to end up with now what are the actions that you're going to do for a multi-year prioritization. And the answer is it really goes from preventive maintenance to minor rehabilitation to major rehabilitation all the way to reconstruction. But again, the new school of thought is always try to think of fixing the good roads first, which is that's why I'm putting thinking of the preventative maintenance first, then the minor rehabilitation all the way to the reconstruction. The prioritization analysis components, again, this is just a summary here. We need to have we need to get into the habit of looking at the benefit of each treatment, not just the cost. If you just look into the cost, we will never pick a good treatment. We're gonna always look at the cheap treatment that's not gonna last you long. You always have to keep in mind what's effectiveness or what's the benefit of having each certain treatment. We need to know what's the life cycle cost of each one of these treatments because that's going to help us to make the right decision. And eventually, again, we need to come up with the ratio because really, if you understand what's the effectiveness or the benefit, which is the area under the curve, and if you know what's the life cycle cost from one of the previous chapters, then you can now divide the benefit over the cost ratio for each one of these treatments that you're really trying to make the best decision which one is the most effective the best really the bottom line here is to get the benefit area under the curve to get the cost whether the present cost or the uniform uniform cost, but you really need to have the cost for each one of the treatments, and then now divide just a ratio, simple ratio between the benefit to the cost ratio, and that would let you um, come up with a more informed decision which treatment is the best for that section. Um, I think here again, just what I was trying to say. So effectiveness is actually non-monetary, and that's why it's hard sometimes to grasp. But it's really the area under the curve for some traffic with some traffic values. The benefits, it can be monetary or it cannot be. It can be non-monetary depending on how you look at it. But also again, it's the area under the curve for some traffic values. Monetary again are considered savings in accidents or travel time or motor vehicle operating cost. If you really have a thick overlay, that's going to cost you a lot, but it has a lot of benefits. Those benefits, again, you can quantify them by, again, if I have a thick overlay, I think it may have an effect on less accidents or less travel time or the operating cost for the from the motor vehicle is gonna be less just by driving on a smooth 4-inch overlay compared to a crack seal or a puck seal. And also we need to remember again the costs. Again, I think we've touched upon this in a previous chapter, but the costs are again agency costs, which is again the state DOT or the city, but also there is a user cost, there is a salvage value, there is maintenance costs, all the way to other relevant costs over the life of the pavement. We need to pay attention that salvage value is a monetary. That's again a monetary benefit that's always difficult to calculate with a reasonable degree of accuracy, but we have to make our best engineering decision to keep that in the equation. Salvage value has a value, especially now with the implementation of reclaimed asphalt pavements, wrap mixtures. We use we do a lot of mill and fill jobs with where we make use of the old materials with certain percentage. We mix it with the new materials and we come up with new roads. So keep that in mind that all these are the costs that we need to have in mind. But salvage value, it has a value, it's real. It's hard to calculate, I know, but you have to at least again to come up with the best cost estimate for it. I think again with that we finish chapter 7. Thank you so much.